Hello and welcome to the Open Systems Media and Embedded Computing Design webcast. What the CRA actually means for embedded engineers. The deadline is looming. This session is sponsored by Digi and TrustInSoft. This is the fourth and final session in today's CRA virtual event from Embedded Computing Design. I am Ken Briota, Editor-in-Chief for Embedded Computing Design, and I'll be your host for today. If you're not familiar with us, please visit embeddedcomputing.com, where you'll find our coverage of everything related to the design of hardware and software for embedded systems. We're chock full of design articles, white papers, blogs, videos, podcasts, and lots more. And we're always adding new content and technology coverage, so check us out. In today's session, we're going to be looking at the fact that in just under 3 months, as of September 11th, manufacturers are going to be required to report actively exploited vulnerabilities and severe incidents to the European Commission. And most embedded engineering teams are still not ready. Our speakers are going to cut through the legal language and translate the CRA into engineering action items, giving you a to-do list for the next 2 and a bit months. Our speakers today are Bob Blumenscheid, he's the product marketing manager at Digi, and Rolland Dudemaine, Director Field Engineering at TrustInSoft. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items for everyone to go over. We have the entire presentation now will likely take around 45 minutes. That'll leave us some time to answer your questions at the end, and we will get to as many as time permits in the order they're received, so please get your questions in early and often. You'll find on the right side of your console window an area where you can enter your questions in real time. As I said, we're going to get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to your question before we run out of time, someone from Digi or TrustInSoft will get back to you with an answer as soon as possible. If you have a technical difficulty or a question pertaining to the webinar's operations, like for instance, your slides aren't advancing properly, or there's some trouble with the audio, please go ahead and put that right into that same question box, and one of our technicians will respond to you as soon as they can with a fix. On the left side of your screen, you will see the speaker's full bios. There's also a clickable tab there that says handouts. That's how you'll be able to download a copy of the slides that are being presented today and some other materials that you may find interesting. The on-demand version of this webcast is going to be available in about 24 hours after we sign off today. So if you missed something, you want to go back and review this session or any of the sessions on today's CRA virtual event, or share them with a colleague or a friend, you can find all of it again through the same link that you used to sign in today. A reminder that all Open Systems Media and Embedded Computing Design webcasts are copyrighted and may not be recorded without prior permission. Well, last note and plug before we get going here, make sure you check out our weekly news show in case you missed it, in which we round up some of the biggest embedded news stories that we've seen every Friday on YouTube, and its accompanying LinkedIn newsletter that comes out every Monday. Make sure you subscribe to both so you don't miss any embedded technology news. This week's episode, as a little preview for you folks here, will feature some of the exciting and cool things that I saw at Automate in Chicago earlier this week. I think that's about enough for me, however. You're here to hear from our speakers, so allow me to virtually hand off the microphone. Bob, I believe you're up first, and the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Ken. I really appreciate it, and appreciate the opportunity to kind of bring in some more conversation about the Cyber Resilience Act, or CRA. I think by now everybody has kind of heard about the Cyber Resilience Act, and what I want to do is, like Ken said, really cut through the general information and things and give you some real action items and dates that really are coming through and are required. I do want you to note the fine print on the right side there. Our Digi's big enough that our legal department has given me verbiage that says this information here is included for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. So please consult a qualified attorney for legal advice. So how is the CRA actually being implemented? And this is kind of the next level, is the ENISA, which is the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity. Yes, the acronym does not match the organization. That was the acronym for the previous organization. They renamed, but they did not change the acronym. and you can find their website there. That is the actual organization in Europe who is responsible for implementing this Cyber Resilience Act and creating the information. Um, what is the SRP? And this is where the rubber meets the road. The SRP is going to be a single reporting platform where you report your vulnerabilities under the CRA. And this is where manufacturers, open source developers, and vendors all will go to report incidents. Okay, so I recommend you looking at the NIST website and getting familiar with this information in advance. So I want to go through kind of the timeline, and as Ken said, the deadline are looming. The CRA really began to brew at the end of 2020, believe it or not. It was published in the official journal of the European Union in November 10th, 2024, as Regulation EU 2024-2827. Now, on December 10th, this regulation came into force. It's fully binding and directly applicable to all member states in the European Union. Any manufacturer around the world that plans to market connected solutions, hardware, and software in the EU must comply. Many people mistakenly believe this law will come into force at the end of 2027. That's not true. I believe there was a 3-year countdown from December 2024 to 2027. That's just absolutely wrong. The next milestone was June 11th, 2026, and that applies to all member states to notify the Commission and other member states authorized to carry out conformity assessments under this regulation. So that milestone is passed. And that really means that the other countries in the EU are now responsible for implementing this. So the next date really is what it means to engineers and OEMs, and this is important. And the date is September 11th, 2026. And this is the Article 14 reporting obligation. And what it means is that starting on September 11th, you're required to report actively exploited vulnerabilities and severe incidents to national authorities, your CCERT, and NIST within 24 hours. And you use the SRP, the reporting platform. So that's just right down the road where you need to be ready to report exploited vulnerabilities. And I'll get more into that in the next slide. The December 2027 deadline is when the CRA fully goes into effect. And what that means is that all applicable products require a CE marking to be authorized for sale in the EU. Now, that's not new. All products that were marketed and shipped to the EU required a CE marking. What's new is that when you put a CE marking on your product, you are saying you comply with the Cyber Resilience Act, or CRA. So that's the challenge coming up. So let's take a look at what is in place and what is your obligation as a manufacturer of a connected product in 11 weeks on September 11th, 2026. So your obligation essentially it starts on the left side. When you've been notified or detected an actively exploited vulnerability, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide, you're required to submit an early warning notification simultaneously to your CCERT, the Computer Security Incident Response Team, and then to NIST via the single reporting platform. And the law says you have to do that within 24 hours. And that's an initial report that you've detected a vulnerability. 14 days after a corrective or mitigating measure is available, you must submit a final report to European authorities. So what the legislation says is, kind of a miracle occurs in a timely manner. That's not defined because these could be small or large. So uh, the dates you have to consider are 24 hours after detecting a problem is staying in compliance with the Cyber Resilience Act. And then once you've published a repair, 14 days. Those are the important dates. Uh, Severe security incidents are considered the same, and the affected users must be informed for all of these. Um, so I want to get into some more detailed information, and we've looked at some specific situations, and I want to share those for you very specifically, um, so to give you a better idea of exactly what this may mean to you. Um, so far it's a lot of information, but the first question is, and then we get this one all the time, does the CRA apply to products placed on the market before December 11th, 2027? And in other words, products that you are shipping today. Now, the CRA applies to those products only if they're modified after that date. So let me give you an example. Say a manufacturer places a smart TV on the market in mid 2027, the middle of next year. For that product, the manufacturer is not obligated to comply with the CRA. In 2028, the company may issue software update to fix a bug that causes apps in the TV to crash after being used for some time. Since this update does not constitute a substantial modification, there's still no requirement to comply. However, in 2029, the manufacturer releases another software update that does qualify as a substantial modification. For example, by adding new functionality that allows the smart TV to control home smart systems. In this situation, the manufacturer must now ensure that the smart TV is brought into compliance with the CRA. So again, that's largely left to you as a manufacturer to analyze those different situations, but you have to be aware of what the laws say. So there is an exception. The obligations set out in Article 14, which is what we were talking about, they apply to all products within the scope of this regulation and placed on the market before December 11th. So again, Article 14 and what we were talking about doesn't apply to any CVE or any issue you find in your product. It applies to actively exploited vulnerabilities. And what that means is there's reliable evidence that a malicious actor has exploited in the system. Okay, and that's defined explicitly. So you're not required specifically to notify on every CVA or even every update, but you are required to notify when there's an actively exploited product. For example, a manufacturer, so so that's the challenge, is filtering those out and having a monitoring system in place to actually know when your product has been exploited. Now, the last question is, you develop a product and before the CRA applies, can you continue to manufacture products identical to that? So the answer is you have to comply even if earlier units of the same product type were already placed on the market. For example, again, a manufacturer produces 10,000 units on a router that does not meet CRA requirements and puts them all in the market before December 11th, 2027. Even if those units have not yet reached end users, they are not yet required to be brought into compliance, say that since they were already placed on the market. However, the manufacturer would not be allowed to produce an additional 5,000 units of the same router and place them on the market on or after December 11th, as those do not comply with the CRA. Now, there's no question this is getting confusing, and we recommend that you go to the facts on the CRA implementation, dig in and find out how this applies to your specific products, your specific launch and development plans, and really work out what is the CRA compliance that you need to provide to your products based on your own activities. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what Digi is doing to help our customers comply with the cybersecurity legislation. So we're providing a broad range of software tools and services designed to facilitate the CRA adoption and compliance. The first one is Digi TrustFence. It's something that we've offered on our products for many years, and it offers security by design. It's an IoT security framework that guides the integration of ready-to-use features such as secure boot, secure firmware updates, encrypted file systems, tamper detection, and other features. And what we do is we expose it in a software framework that lets our customers and our developers easily implement those features that are available in different software and on different processors. Our next offer is the Digi Connect Core security services, and those enable security throughout the product lifecycle. One of the requirements of the CRA is frequent scanning for vulnerabilities that arise after initial product release. That includes curated vulnerability reports that highlight critical issues, a security software layer that includes pre-integrated security patches for common vulnerabilities, and consulting and support services for patches and fixer integration. Finally, we've added Digi Connect Core cloud services that support security maintenance with secure and reliable remote over-the-air updates, enabling process automation, monitoring, remote device management, and cost reduction. So I just want to jump into our security monitoring feature, which is available today, and talk about that. It's new. But this new tool is available in the security services. Our customers can monitor the security status of their entire fleet of devices. Manufacturers can upload their firmware and software bill of material, and SBOM, through the user interface of our cloud platform, Digi Remote Manager. Configure the automated SBOM scanning frequency and generate the corresponding common vulnerabilities and exposure CVE reports. So, in addition to being fully integrated, it also fully available via application programming interfaces, APIs, for seamless integration with web applications. So we're implementing trial CVE scans for our new product introduction development kits to enable OEMs in the design phase with our security services, in addition to our cloud services that we've already mentioned. So, Ken mentioned a to-do list for compliance before September 11th, and I would offer you these 4 steps. First of all is take a look at the CRA risk tiers that are defined by ANISA. There's a default or non-important class, and the example frequently given is a toothbrush, a connected toothbrush. And then there's important classes 1 and 2, and critical classes. Most industrial connected devices are class 1, and that really requires a third-party conformity assessment starting in June 2026. So the bell has rung on that. So it's important as a first step to classify your products and identify where you fit. And then the next thing, and this is very important, start working on your software bill of materials if you haven't already. Software SBOM needs to be created for your products and maintained. And you really need to know your full component inventory of software to file a CVE report. And that's SBOM is de facto mandatory 15 months early or September 11th, 2026. And the other step is find the SRP, the reporting platform, and register and get your company ready to go there. You need to be enrolled and ready before September 11th. Okay. If you go out to the again to the NIST site and look at the questions, there's quite a bit of information needed to make that report, and the 24-hour reporting window doesn't really accommodate a registration delay when you're looking for all that information to register a problem. So get registered, get ready to go, and be ready. Now, the SRP is not available yet. It should be available very shortly. The current commitment is end of June, and in September 11th, this process will be manual. It won't be available through automation or APIs yet. So you need a workflow that is ready to go on September 11th. You can't wait until September 11th or when you detect an active exploit to do this. And then the last thing that I recommend is to audit your OTA update pipeline. If you have connected products in the field, it's going to be a requirement to deliver over-the-air updates. Try it. Do you have a process? Do you have a workflow? If not, you've got a critical compliance gap here, and this is the thing to fix in the next immediately. You need to work on that. So we've been working on CRA compliance with our customers for quite some time, and you'll see a great deal of information here that we've published about the CRA and how our products comply. Um, the white paper we did with NXP is actually available in the download section of this webinar, and I would recommend you take a look at that. It's really a process roadmap of exactly what you need to do to comply in very straightforward terms. It's a great document. And then finally, if you do want to talk to Digi about security, the CRA, and how we do that, we can make a 1 hour security consultation available through that link there. So hopefully I've generated some interest and questions. Put them in the box and we'll deal with them at the end. Right now, I'm going to turn this presentation over to Rolland for the second half of our presentation.
Thank you, Bob. It was a lot of information, but hopefully we can exploit some of it. In the second part as well. So what's there's going to be a little bit of a repeat here, but what's really important is that the CRA makes you the system integrator, the system provider responsible. If there are multiple components that are containing security issues, then because you are shipping those, if those security issues are reachable in the integrated system, then you become responsible. And likewise, like Bob mentioned already, you're also responsible for pushing the updates and to maintain the system secure enough. That's going to be actually a challenge, because if the customer does not voluntarily update the system and there are security issues, there's an open discussion right now in Europe whether actually the system provider would be still responsible, and so long as they offer the security patch, then it may be allowed, but there are still some open points. One important point, though, that I'd like to point out is while this is a European law and it's clear by now that it applies to everyone selling in Europe, there are other comparable approaches all around the world. For example, the cyber trust mark is an element that's a little less complete than what the CRA requires, but still goes in the same direction of making sure that you have a declaration of how your system is going to behave from a security perspective. China also has a series of laws where you are supposed to report how you treat data, which is then more comparable to GDPR, and how you treat security in your system, especially for connected systems. And that's CSL. And less known, but still true, India has some initiatives as well, and 13 is actually equivalent to ENISA in that if you sell into India and you're going to have a connected system deployed and sold there, then if there is a security breach, you're supposed to be able to report to CERT-In for those security breaches. And I think they're a little more tolerant. It's 3 days, not one, but it still applies. So all around where this goes is that you need to have not just the connection with ENISA and the registration with ENISA to be able to go through the reporting phase, but you really have to set up your organization to be able to have a process that manages that properly. If you are also making a safety system, you also must have a parallel process as well. So this is not something that's completely out of this world. The difficulty or the challenge here is, one, to have the process in place to be able to report to the correct authorities all around the world. And the second is to be able to reach a design that hopefully will not have any of those security issues. So to be able to move forward in the approach there and diagnose how to keep that system secure, or to make the system secure, because that's not something you can patch in. Security is something that needs to be described and considered from the beginning of your system. The most important element to consider around your system is what is called in security the attack surface. And the first attack surface is actually from the bottom of this slide, social engineering. If there's a default password in your box and the default password becomes public, you may have very strong security measures, but you actually introduced a security hole. So a default admin password, for example, is something that would be quite difficult to enforce as being secure. Other instances is that there's been hacks where people contacted employees of the companies making the system, and eventually they got access to the account, which led them into access to the complete source code of the system. And once there's that, then you can move on to the next phase. If social engineering doesn't work, or does work, then you can move to a hardware engineering. So you can try to open the box, and having something in hardware that actually allows you to figure out, to observe that the box was indeed open, can be as simple as a sticker that proves that the box was open. Then that's something that can protect you from a security perspective at the system level. There's and of course, if there's no protection, then people may hook up a JTAG device or a UART, look into all the hardware communication ports that are available and try to hack in. And once you've reached that hacking point, then, or if you just reach through any of the networking capabilities of your connected system, then there are other aspects that you can consider to be able to make sure that your system is robust. As Bob mentioned, one of the elements that seem obvious, but it's fundamental, is to know what software you're delivering. If you do not have a software bill of material, it's very likely that you actually do not really control what you're shipping. But once you have one, you know what you have, then you can describe what the state, the security state, and the robustness state in general of each piece of the software that you're using to ship your system. Then there's a discussion about architecture, and architecture can be very important in security to mitigate impact. So if indeed you can hack into the web server that configures your system, but you can't actually corrupt anything else in the system because some other part is actually checking everything, then that may make the attack harder, more difficult to go through. And the last one, which is what we're going to focus in the rest of this presentation, is what I call very loosely code quality. It's basically software hacks, software attacks always go through the existence of bugs. So what you really want to make sure is that you design, oh, interesting. You want to go through your design to be able to ensure that there's beyond the architecture and beyond the components that you use, the code that you create have a code quality efficient enough good enough to be able to prove that there's a very low likelihood of a security issue, or it will have no impact. If we go a little bit more in detail, one thing to be aware of is what's an exploit anyway. And sorry for the complex diagram, but that's actually usually how it goes. An exploit is typically not a single issue, but it's typically a chain of issues to be able to completely take over the system. Usually it starts with a logic bug or a state confusion or a bad behavior, an unpredicted, unenvisioned state of the system that leads into something that behaves incorrectly in the platform, in the software, and causing a memory safety issue. Memory safety issue is a general term for buffer overflow, use after freeze, stack corruptions, out of bound access, all those things that make the system, the software actually corrupt its own data, leading into a situation where the code will not behave as expected. And once you're able to do that, you're able to diverge from the regular execution flow, and you're able to start executing as a hacker additional behavior. Could be external code, could be using something called gadget, and basically you're reusing the existing code to do something additional. But the point being is that once you have that memory safety issue, you can corrupt the system and you can execute something that was not intended to execute at all. And once you're there, you have gained what is called a primitive for the next level of attack. The next level of attack could be a memory safety issue again, could be another logic bug, and that allows you to basically go in two directions. Either you are going to be able, as an attacker, to gather information, and that information gathering is very important to be able to basically gather data that you may be able to resell to other parties. And that's really where the exploit is becoming clear. Then that's the part that you have to report under CRA. Or it could also be a control flow hijack. So basically, I can take control of the system. And then here in that diagram, there's another impacting typical issue that would be applied or used is privilege escalation. Once you're able to run some code locally on the platform, then you can go into the next stage to try to become administrator or to take over the system. If it's a tiny IoT, you may not have privilege escalation to do at all. If you run on a bigger OS, that may be necessary to take over the system. And that leads into eventually a full system compromise. And of course, those two paths of having information leak or being able to, or having a control being taken are two ways to be attacked, and those two would have to be reported under CRA. Is that real? Well, and that's really the overarching reason why that became a rule in Europe, a law in Europe, is the fact that even people know how to test. They know how to develop software. They know how to test. But ultimately, even after deployment of everything, there are still remaining memory safety issues or runtime errors. And so on the left side, what you see is the CWE. So in the US, Mitra is making a list of all the reported CVEs, the reported vulnerabilities, and also making a list of the weaknesses, the bugs that led into the list of the led into those CVEs. And when you make the list, the left side is the overall element here. So almost half of them are caused by memory safety issues. On the right side, however, if you filter out and keep only the embedded software, if you make an embedded system and typical IoT or connected systems like in the medical field, railway, everywhere, that would be counted there, is it demonstrates that there's very few logic issues remaining, those 14%. And the remaining issues there to exploit the system are really all memory safety issues. So buffer overflows, use after free, null pointer, and also calculation overflows, integer overflows, for example, that lead into, again, a memory safety issue. And some people may say, well, yeah, but that's a bug. It's actually a safety issue more than it is security issue. And you're not wrong, but that's incomplete. It's quite important to, we all agree that's a bug. Those runtime errors, those memory safety issues are bugs. And then it's all down to the intent. So in fact, if there's a bug because there's a bad design in a bridge, then and I'm talking about the concrete bridge. What may happen is that you have like 20 trucks going over the bridge at the same time, and that was not intended. And everyone would conclude that it's a safety issue. However, if there's someone who knows about that and has bad intentions and want to destroy the bridge as fewer trucks go, or few cars, but the key ones go over the bridge, then suddenly that becomes a sabotage. And that becomes really a malicious effect here, which becomes truly a security issue. So in the end, it's a bug. And the effect of that bug, of the exploitation of that bug, will make it a functional issue, a safety issue, or security issue. But the point is, when that means that from a security perspective, any bug that leads into that memory corruption can be theoretically exploited. So you have to hunt them. And so to hunt them, the problem is those memory corruptions can't be tested for. On shows, what I typically say is that there are bugs that you can test for and the others. The bugs you can test for are the typical logic bugs. But for those memory safety issues, you can't test for a memory corruption because you would be testing that there's an incorrect access everywhere. So you need tools to do that. It would be very typical in any engineering team that you apply static analyzers, SAST, and those tools typically focus more on coding guidelines than they focus on behavior. And what the typical reputation is that it's going to be giving you a lot of noise with a signal to noise ratio that's not good. So very few bugs with a lot of false positives that are happening there. And the reason is that those tools typically do not require you to give any information. You just give the code and they try to figure out everything by themselves. And that's the problem. You need to understand how the code will be used, and then more accurate reporting could be done. And in fact, when you do dynamic testing, that's exactly what you do. You do a testing of concrete code built on the concrete platform or simulator, and you run concrete test cases. And then if it leads to a crash, you found one of those memory safety issues. But the problem is you can't test for every single value of every single input that your system may take. That's just theoretically impossible. And also, there are silent corruptions. It's very typical when you have situations where you run a test in debug mode, everything passes. and then suddenly you build the integrated system in release mode and it crashes. Well, that's exactly where dynamic testing falls short. And so more and more people have been turning to formal methods. And formal methods have a reputation of actually being very heavy to apply. And so and that's not wrong. I mean, you need to write a specification. Typically, for most formal proof tools, you need to specify every single behavior of your software, and to be able to be verified, and then provide the code and have tools that will check the specification and the code together. Or you need to write a very strong model and then generate code. But obviously that doesn't scale, and also that doesn't work when you need to integrate existing code, which may not have that spec. So the best case would be to have some tool that can do formal verification, not proof. It's a little bit weaker, but it's still quite important and complete, to be able to verify that there is no memory safety issue in your software, but with a good usability case. And so that's exactly what we do. TrustInSoft provides a tool called TrustInSoft Analyzer, which wasn't very original as a name. And the tool is basically a command line tool that you can deploy in your CI, which can analyze a combination of C, C++, and Rust. And the purpose of the tool is to be able to figure out all the path leading to those undefined behaviors, which is the technical term for runtime errors in C and C++. Then the tool will be able to point out where those issues are. And beyond the command line tool that you can run in CI, there's also interfaces that you can use. And the picture here is showing what is informally a debugger, but really it's the official name is the root cause investigator. It's the kind of what I call a multiverse debugger. It will show you all the possible paths that the analyzer has investigated based on all the possible inputs that can be given to into your software. The real difference here is that instead of doing dynamic testing with specific values, TrustInSoft Analyzer allows you to give ranges of inputs. So if you know a function should only take positive input, you can give a range as input of all the positive integers, and the tool will figure out which of the code paths are reachable and the consequences of having those values inside. The key points there is that the tool is sound. So if TrustInSoft Analyzer has not found any runtime error, any alarm in your software, and you have provided all the possible inputs that you consider reasonable into your API, then you have a demonstration that there is no such runtime error. That's exactly what soundness is. So we verify our software with some external test suites that demonstrate the soundness of the tool. Because of the way the tool works, it will basically go crawl the graph of your application. It makes a note of that, and it provides also code coverage. And that's quite important because that allows you to in a very detailed way at the statement level and even MCDC to be able to examine the path that may be reachable. Incidentally, if you've given all the inputs, you can determine also that code, unreachable code. And so the difference between other tools is that the number of false positives that we see that our customers observe with our tool is very, very low. The reasons is that the tool can be fast and imprecise, but can be configured to be very precise on the important locations. And that means that the tool is both fast and precise where it needs to be. And that means then you can have a very good behavior, and you can start to trust the tool. Once you start using the tool, typically You switch from oh yeah, the tool, all those static analysis tools give me a lot of noise. That's a false positive. That's I don't care. I will ignore all of them, to a situation with TrustInSoft Analyzer that you're going to assume it's a real issue by default and consider how to solve the problem, because usually it is a real issue. Interestingly, most of our customers use the tool also on low-level hardware. For example, boot firmwares, device drivers, and everything that relates to exactly the attack surface that we were talking about earlier. Interactions with the hardware or communication path are typical paths which need to be examined for security, and our tool is very strongly used for those aspects. Another element where it's both security critical and using hardware is the OTA support, where likewise you may have some crypto and hardware interactions, and the tool can verify that even though there are some hardware interactions, none of those would lead to a data corruption. For example, CrowdStrike. Going back to the helicopter view, what I've been focusing on is the right path here, and so the tool that we provide will not remove activities. Ultimately, you still have to do penetration testing or consider how to attack your software, describe the attack surface, report eventual exploitations to the ENISA if it ever happens. But at least that means that when it comes to development activities, the tool can very much reduce the amount of failures or issues that could be observed and crashes in the overall system, because those runtime errors that would have an effect in the integrated system late in the game are detected at the developer seat when we're looking at code. And it's not just security, it's actually affecting positively safety, and it's even affecting positively the functionality development, because once your software actually does what you wrote and not some behavior that's different between debug and release, then suddenly your development becomes more robust. And so you lead into a situation where your system becomes more secure as a consequence. And so bringing that kind of tool into your software development flow can even make the case for the fact that you did your good job to limit the impact of security issues, or even demonstrate that there are none to some extent, which then would limit the need for reporting. That's the end of my part as well. So I'm going to give the mic back to Ken.
Well, I'm gonna ask you to stay here with me and invite Bob back, because we're gonna jump right into Q&A here. We've got a little bit of time left, and we've gotten some great questions throughout this whole time here while you guys have been giving us all this great information. So I'm gonna jump right in. The first one is about intersections between various cybersecurity regulations, specifically asking about the Radio Equipment Directive, RED, who introduced a cybersecurity component last year. So they're asking about intersection between RED and CRA and whether or not there are different methods to attain compliance for both. But I want to broaden that a little bit and say, are there any other regulations that are either currently existing or coming into effect that you can sort of find efficiencies in complying with both, or other things that companies should be thinking about? And Bob, why don't you take first swing
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, it's a great question, and at Digi we're kind of familiar with that because we make products that need to comply with RED, um, and of course that's the Radio Equipment Directive that says that your product can't damage anything, and they did add encryption and cryptography to that. So the question specifically was, can we report the same way? And right now, it's okay because the default path to red is self declaration, self certification. So if you do that, you go through, you certify your product yourself, and you move on. If you go, you're right. If you go to a third party organization, it's not going to be NIST. It's going to be companies like TUV who do provide red compliance. Now, the CRA goes further than red. So, uh, red compliance is going to be kind of the table stakes, I would say. And then the CRA compliance goes further. So you'll have to do both for the CRA. And there's a head start in complying to the red. But the bottom line is no, there's not one particular. Everything won't converge on the ENISA for red and CRA. And for the other ones, Rolland made a great point about other regulations going on in other countries, and there's no question each of those will have their own enforcement body and reporting process. Um, the CE trust mark in the US and everything else. So that's going to be, I think that's going to be a challenge worldwide.
I think so. Rolland, do you want to add anything there?
Not much. I mean, it's the ultimately you still have to, I mean, set up a process, take a consultant, and that will lead you onto the right path to be able to address that, and hopefully worldwide then.
Yeah. This one's interesting because it's sort of about upstream and downstream reporting requirements here, and sort of almost redundancy of reporting. The question is for actively exploited reporting requirements, for which the deadline is September 11th, coming up in just shy of 3 months. If you're an OEM platform integrator of tier 1 products or components, what is your obligation for reporting? The tier 1 supplier reported one of their products or an active exploitation, and you're using their component as part of your platform, but your platform, to your knowledge, is not being exploited. But again, I want to broaden that question a little bit. Are there built-in upstream, downstream reporting requirements? Are we asking every layer to report if they know of an active exploitation or not? Whichever one of you wants to go in there first, feel free.
I mean, that I thought I've been thinking about that question. I mean, when I saw that one go by, because Rolland was talking about it, and that is really a can of worms. But I think the bottom line is, yes, everyone is responsible for reporting their own active exploit. And in my case, if say we designed a product with NXP and NXP reported an active exploit, we would need, we would expect NXP to notify us as a user, and then
Sure.
we would analyze that and say, is that going to affect us as well? Now the question is, are they exploiting our product specifically because that NXP? I guess the answer is no, but if NXP has reported it, each company in that stream should report it as well, because it applies to everybody all the way through that stream. Now,
it seems like a better safe than sorry kind of situation to
well,
me. And also, it's sort of a built-in accountability, right? If somebody doesn't report, but the rest of their stream does.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's the great point is, and it goes to the other question of, well, how do you get enforced? I mean, this really, and the intent is to create visibility for this. So if this is all public information, so if somebody in your supply chain is reporting and you're not, it's pretty clear that you're negligent, and you have a problem. You should have been notified out of it. We all know ignorance of the law is no excuse. I've been
That's
told,
right.
and so it's the responsibility of each company and each product to report it.
Yeah, I guess I go in the same direction, but it's one important distinction is the reporting under CRA is a public reporting, as Bob mentioned. The case of should the tier 1 reported to me is more of a contract, a B2B business contract discussion, and or responsible disclosure thing, which equates to contract in my mind. And so what you want to have is make sure that your suppliers are going to report to you all the issues, actually the exploited ones, and hopefully not the non-exploited ones as well. So you can actually manage to upgrade your system so that it can't be exploited. Because if it can't be exploited, then you don't have to report anything.
Yeah, I guess as I understand it, the reporting requirement is known or active exploits. If I guess if there aren't, even if you've got an upstream supplier reporting an active exploit, if you don't have one, I guess it's a gray area. It's a little bit
Well, yeah,
undefined as of now.
it's interesting because, I mean, Rolland, you mentioned JTAG, and if somebody leaves JTAG open and somebody says, hey, that JTAG is being exploited in a product, but on our product, if they encrypted JTAG, it's not affected. So,
Mm.
yeah, but Roland, that's a great point about going to your supply chain and making, looking at modifications to your contracts to make sure that there's a requirement to notify you of their issues.
Right.
That's going to be very important.
Well, the secure by design strategy is going to become a big deal. I mean, it's already a big deal, but I think that your suppliers who can claim and certify security by design are going to have a distinct advantage moving forward with respect to these kinds of legislations.
It's a question whether you can do I'm not looking, so I don't have to report anything kind of policy.
Yeah. Again, ignorance of the law, I'm not sure is going to get you out of this one.
Yeah.
This is an interesting point. We got a couple still. I mean, unfortunately, we run out of time, but I want to hit this one. Any practical understanding, asks one of our viewers here, on how the EU will actually use the reports of vulnerabilities for devices? Is it going to create some sort of a database? I presume these reports are only going to be made public after bug fixes are also reported, because we can't be out here reporting vulnerabilities blindly.
I remember seeing that. I mentioned the US MITRE database, and I know there's a European one that's being built up as well. So I would expect that those exploited systems will be registered in the European system.
That makes sense. All right, and then I think we've got time for just one more, and this one's great because this has come up, I think, in every single session today. So you guys get to weigh in as well. One of our viewers says that they have a product designed and CE certified in 2024 before these cybersecurity requirements under CRA became applicable. They plan to continue selling the same product in the European market. They don't plan to make any changes to hardware, firmware, or software. In your opinion, hashtag not legal advice, would this be permitted to continue? Would they be permitted to continue placing the product on the EU market after December 2027 based on the CE certification, or do they need to reassess and update to comply with CRA cybersecurity requirements? I'm going to let each of you take an answer at this if you want. From my understanding, it depends on what level of the CE you were doing, and B, CE, some of their levels are lower requirements, so you would have to do some updates. But I'd love to hear what you guys think. Rolland, do you want to go first?
I'll go first then. I think you need to reassess is the short answer, because there's a gray area where whether when your system is technically sold in December or shipped in December, or I mean, if that's the version that was delivered, that was basically constructed before December. So there's probably going to be a little tolerance there, but ultimately, once you produce units in December or afterwards, they need to be reassessed because they will have to follow the new law because technically they're sold after the date. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
I guess,
Bob?
yeah, if I want to be folksy, you can run, but you can't hide. There are things you like Rolland said. If you stockpile products while you're doing things, you can continue to ship those. But sooner or later, the CRA will be the law you need to comply to, and the earlier you get started on it, the easier the process will be for you.
Yeah. And it does seem like CRA, whether or not it's going to be a lift, I think a lot of the lift is going to be operational in terms of reporting and things like that. It will end up in better process for most companies. So it's probably just a good idea to get in line anyway.
I have seen some industrial system provider actually use that as an opportunity to deprecate some existing platforms and advise the customer to buy new ones.
Oh, that's an interesting play. I like that. Well, unfortunately, I think that's just about the end of our time here today. Folks out there, if we didn't get to your question, one of the folks from Digi or TrustInSoft will be in touch as soon as they can, depending on who's relevant, and maybe both. Remember, you will receive a link to the archive of this presentation so you can view it again later at your convenience. I have to thank Bob and Rolland for this great presentations and discussion. This was really informative and pretty fun. And of course, thanks to both Digi and TrustInSoft for sponsoring this event. Of course, none of these events or anything possible without you out there, our viewers, engineers, and developers building and complying here in our embedded systems world. This has been the final session of today's CRA virtual event from Embedded Computing Design. Thank you to all of you who've been with us all day today, and thanks to all of our sponsors and speakers throughout the day. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time, and don't forget to get your documentation in line.
Thanks for having us, Ken.
All right.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Rolland.
Mm-hmm.